So, good morning, Lesley. I'm very excited that you agreed to come back on to Writers Read
Mhm.
for September 2022 and chat. And you've got lots of things to talk about this morning. So, you're in the middle of writing a novel,
Yeah,
Mossborn, is that right?
that's correct.
Do
Yes.
you want to tell us all about that?
It's based in 1530 in the most northern island in Shetland. In fact, the most northern island in the UK. And it's a critical period where it's just shifting from being Norse into Scots.
Right.
Um, but the thing about it is that there's not an awful lot known about this tiny little island, Unst, at that time. I've been researching in Norway and Denmark and in Scotland as well. But the challenge was to create this world that people could relate to and make it
Wow.
authentic.
Yeah. So you're world building a world that existed. It's not like you can create
Uh-huh.
that out of your imagination because it did exist. So how have you managed to do those layers and things like language and how have you approached all that?
You've actually mentioned something that became incredibly important because in Shetland, up until probably they reckon about the early 1700s, they didn't speak Scots. They spoke a version of Norse called Norn, and it was an oral language, so it's not written down. So anything that is written down that says it's Norn is probably a Scottish scribe,
Right.
trying to make sense of it. So I had to make big decisions, and this is something when you are writing a historical novel. If there's a different language involved, how much to include in the novel? That's included. It has to be kind of authentic. So I discovered that Icelandic is actually quite a pure form of Norse. And I
Okay.
also went to the Icelandic sagas, and they have been translated. So I kind of used some of it. But as I said, then I had to make decisions about how much to put in.
Right. Okay. Wow. So I mean, really quite fascinating because the whole thing about writing any historical novel is you have all the research, but you don't want to show that there's the research.
Yeah.
So that selection of what do I put in, what do I leave out, must have been quite difficult.
Yes. And also, it's a small island, and they are very proud of their heritage.
Yeah.
So, you don't want to go against that. So, apart from the language, I had to be really accurate about the geography, the archaeology, the social structures at that time. Um, so, it's involved a lot of research.
Mhm.
Um, but that's before you even then make it a novel that people can relate to.
Right.
That
Yeah.
um, sometimes called regional narratives. That I think that's a really negative term because some of the books I enjoy reading take me into a different world.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so, but I had to find a way of allowing that access.
Right. And I think you're right about the regional being, it sort of dismisses it as being, oh, well, you'll only be interested if you're interested in that, as opposed,
Mm-hmm,
wow, this is a new place that I can discover. A bit like,
mm-hmm.
it's like a going on holiday to somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, some of the most profound books that I've read, and certainly the last 2 years, one was The Glovemaker, which is just at that point in American history where Mormons have arrived um, in Utah, and it's a tiny community in the middle of winter. And you would think, and it's within a very few miles, that the book is based. But it's phenomenal. It's this phenomenal novel. And the other one that really had a big effect on me was Prairie Earth, which won so many awards, and it's by I suppose an amazing author who they looked at everything within a very small area of Kansas, the historical records, the geography and whatever, and they just built this beautiful narrative. And to me, that was a big influence.
Okay. How much does the religion and the sort of I don't know, did it have a monarchy, or was it, you know?
Yeah, I think you've really hit on some important things, and I didn't choose the date. The date chose me for various reasons. I had been in Shetland Archives, trying to think now, it'd be 2014, probably just about the year before that, researching another novel. And the archivist, who's amazing there, said, I'm sorry, but I don't have anything on that date that you're looking for, but I have this. And he brought me a document, and in that document, there was a paragraph talking about children being transported to Bergen to work on, it's a garrison. They were rebuilding the garrison in 1530.
Right.
And that was my starting point. I then spent a number of years finding out why, and then discovered that right at that point, the king who in Denmark, who was ruling all these, it's a bit like the Commonwealth, you know, he was ruling all these countries, including Norway, decided everybody would follow Luther rather than being Catholic.
Right.
So the impact that had on the on Unst, because they were going back and forward to Bergen, they kind of saw themselves as Norse at that point. And then you've got the tension with Scotland, because Scotland had been given Shetland and Orkney as part of a dowry, you know, for Queen Margaret, you know, of Denmark. And so we're talking about maybe 60 years after that happened. And the Scots were seeing this as a place where, you know, you could get land. It was almost like plantation in Ireland, you know.
Right.
So I had this wonderful scenario of tension. It was there, you know, I could write a novel.
The conflict was already, that you had the conflict. You didn't have to go finding it.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
You know, so and also right at this point in which I couldn't believe this, King James V, who has been held captive since a very young boy, escapes. You know, so I've got all these influences going on, and I could play with that.
Oh, it sounds amazing. I'm really looking forward to it. Its publication, Lesley. Do you have a publication date in mind, or?
Probably it would have to be next year, late next year.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that's something to really look forward to in 2023. And I'll have to have you back on Writers Read. It'll appearance. You've been traveling the summer, reading from Daughters, Wives, Resilience. Could you do you have any readings that you might want to do from that and tell us a bit about it?
Absolutely. And I can tell you a little bit about the anthology. For a number of years, I've met with three Paisley writers, Morag Smith, Catherine Metcalf, and Mary, and Morag Smith and Mary Smith. And they're eminent writers, and we've brought work in progress every Tuesday. And we then went on to online during lockdown. And what we started to notice that was nearly every Tuesday, we were talking about female ancestors, about how they were almost giving us a template to cope. They had coped with wars, they had coped with, you know, Spanish flu, you know, all sorts of things. And so this anthology was born, Daughters, Wives, Resilient Lives. And it was launched at the Paisley Book Festival this year. And so the first one that I'm going to read is actually about my aunt's experience of migration or immigration to Canada. And this is the longest poem in the book. It's called New World. He lied. Every day living at the edge of this wilderness screams it. every step dragging 3 wee bairns to the standpipe to get water, water that ran freely from the kitchen tap back home, water she could be running her hand under if she hadn't fallen for his lies, not just his, but her brother's. Both reveling in their wee adventure, working down a uranium mine, laughing at the prospect of big money, more than they'd earned on the railway back home. Big money, big talk, men talking, lies leaking from that shed someone set up as a bar. That's what they call it, not a pub. Not even embarrassed at how their vowels ooze through words, soften their R's. She swipes her eyes with the corner of her apron, lifts the cloth from the bucket, wrings it out, throws it on the floor. The wood, reluctant to give up, muck trailed in every time she or one of the bairns go out, like to get water to scrub the floor. She catches snot from her nose on the rib of her sleeve, catches it before it reaches the floor. Never would she have believed she could cry for 3 months. What did he expect? Living in a hut with no heating, no running water, with 3 bairns, 4 if she was right, and another on the way. He promised a house, a new life, a better life. Couldn't even meet her in the bairns at the right airport. Changing a toddler on the floor, waiting, wondering why he wasn't there to meet them. Taking a whole day to drive from Ottawa to Toronto. Her with no dollars to buy food. The long drive north, him not understanding her disappointment as they drove through the little town he said was now home. Bumping off the road onto a track that led to this hut. She refused to call it a cabin. No bigger than the Anderson shelter her mum and dad built in their back garden. She moves her knees out of the grooves on the floor. How long did he expect them to live here, surviving on a pittance? They'd never have enough money to move into a proper house. Him not handing over his wages, going to that shed and drinking most of it. Never did that back home. She always got an unopened wage packet back home, took pride in that he did. He shouldn't have come here on his own. Most of the men, unmarried, living a wild life, an unmarried life, drinking, and worse. She'd heard the stories. She'd seen the woman, scarlet-lipped, corset-nipped woman, but he insisted, begged, wanted her and the bairns to join her. He lied. This wasn't any way to survive. She gave up everything they'd worked for. She pushes the apron into her mouth, can't wake the bairns. He'll be back soon enough.
Oh my goodness, my heart's in my mouth, Lesley. That story. I don't know if you're aware, I lived in Canada for 21 years.
Right.
And we lived in British Columbia and it was quite beautiful. But one of the things two things that struck me. One was the plight of the Indigenous people and what colonialism had done and, destroyed and torn apart their communities. But the second was women who'd come out, years before when it had been so rural and the hard life that they, and that when you sort of talked about, he lied, absolutely. Yeah, so many didn't know what they were coming out to. Wow, that was, took my breath away. Thank you.
I want to mention as well, I read this on an American radio program, and the gentleman was a person of color, and he commented on how his mother had gone out to Canada, and no, he had been left. I think he was in Jamaica, and and he said that was my. He could relate to that. It's a story that so many people can relate to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And those rural, tiny communities, and where it was men working down the mines, or men working in timber, or whatever. The community was geared toward the male.
Yes.
Women were there to support, but literally surviving, and bringing up the children. So, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that.
That's okay.
Yeah, you paint an amazing picture with your words. Yeah.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. That is something that I really focus on, because I think very graphically. So I see a picture. So it's almost like interpreting that for others. I should also maybe mention my aunt, and it's a family story. I mean, her children talk about her arrival. It's not a secret. But I said she cried for 3 months. They said she cried for 3 years.
Yeah.
She hated it so much. But
did she come back, or did she stay there?
No, because you never had the money to come back.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's also not a family secret that he did. He became an alcoholic, and so many of them did. The other thing I discovered was that many of the people who lived in that area got cancer because it was a uranium mine.
Because of the uranium, right.
And there's a number, especially women, who are cancer survivors.
Yeah. And part of that was they didn't know what they were dealing with. It's like asbestos. Oh, we've got this amazing thing, we can put it everywhere. It actually kills people, makes them very sick. Let's move on to some of your other work before we get too bogged down into.
Yeah, I know.
Do you want to read us something else from that book, or would you like to read something from Thrawn?
Actually, I'm going to read one more because, and I always do this after reading New World, because my mum should have immigrated with her brothers and sisters. And she had given up her work and, had bought her passage and was about to go when her sister, who was sponsoring her, got married and said she couldn't. So she stayed, and she got very used to writing, those blue airmails.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, and you only got so much to write.
Yes.
It's almost like some of the 17th century documents I actually transcribed for the Orkney Archive. They're all folded little letters, into this small.
Because it was all you could. That's all you could send. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And they're fascinating, the letters. But when I then went to live in Ethiopia, she started to write them again, and she would write 2-3 times a week. But we kind of colluded in that I didn't tell her the truth. I didn't tell her what was going on there, because I had stepped into a war zone. There was a civil war going on, and so this gives you a little inkling of what my experience was like, and it's called An Unattending of Ravens. Hyenas slip through the edge of the city, firefly eyes dance in the dark, feed on offerings left by a man in a white shawl, who sees it as a blessing, left by soldiers who see it as just. Time edges towards curfew. We sit in a triumph stag, top down, arms tucked in. Inquisitive, they scent our warmth, fresh blood, raise a snout against my hair. Pincer jaws skim an ear, pant fetid breath greetings. Lights of the compound catch the white shawl. Familiarity times his steps into the pack, the placing of food, his escape from this fight. Ripping and tearing until none exists. Mengistu ordered enemy flesh offered to the pack. The taste remembered between yellow teeth, a memory so sweet it brings them each night to the edge of the city, where my companion turns to me, whispers, hyenas don't laugh in Addis Ababa.
Oh, wow. What year was that, Lesley, when you were there?
It was the early 80s.
It was the early 80s, right? Yeah.
In fact, while I was there, Britain declared war
Yeah.
in Argentina as
Yeah.
well, which caused all sorts of problems for me.
Yeah.
You know,
Of course.
because it was a communist government and anti-British.
Yeah. I remember I was living in Los Angeles at the time when the Falklands happened. And I think I was working in advertising, one of the copywriters came out and went, what's the headline?
Mhm.
What is the headline? I said, the headline for me is why? Why?
Uh-huh. Exactly. It was a strange time.
Was it?
But it also, I mean, and that was actually my master's dissertation at Stirling,
Oh,
was using my mum's letters, which she had decided to only write about really happy things at home, family life, and whatever. And I was going through this.
mm,
So it gave me this lovely position, to play with. So I used it for my dissertation,
wow.
her letters
Fascinating.
and the reality at the same time, the same date of what was going on with me.
Yeah. But you were both pretending, you were both kind of hiding
Yeah.
the blue emails. The blue emails were like, oh, everything's fine.
Oh, totally, absolutely. And for people listening, the structure of when you are writing, you can't maintain that. So, and that's what happened in reality, was that you couldn't keep on pretending. And I suppose the flip point was when my aunt at home, who I was very fond of, got seriously ill. And my mother had to start telling me the truth about that.
Mm.
And at the same time, things were really getting very difficult in Ethiopia. And it sort of all built up in me really quickly. So, it became kind of explosive, so yeah, we had to break through that barrier of, illusion.
Yeah.
The reality had kicked in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now you were at the Scottish Parliament this year as well, was that right?
I was.
Can you tell us about that, the experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I used to lecture in outdoor learning. It was actually education I lectured in, but and because I'm kind of passionate about the environment. And in this year's Women's Day, my collective of women writers, Women with Fierce Words, were invited to the Parliament. There was going to be a big rally there of women reading about the environment. And I knew that we were going to be doing this. And I then got an email saying, Kathleen Jamie, who's coming, is ill. Can you stand in? And I don't know. It was like that. Oh my God. And then, oh, this is amazing. Whenever will I get an opportunity like this? And I felt so guilty about that. Sorry, Kathleen. Yeah, it was a very powerful event.
Mm.
And I had always said that my dream was to read the title poem from Thrawn in the Scottish Parliament. And I got the opportunity to.
And you did. Wonderful. Can you read that for us today?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I've since discovered that it's been read at other rallies. It seems to, yeah. So it's called thrawn, which is a Scottish term for being stubborn, kicking back against the norm. I am a dangerous woman, with words that are fierce, can pierce, punch through barriers some would place in my path. They can reduce others to tears, highlight fears that only a woman would know. I am a dangerous woman. I have a voice, and it will ring. It will sing with the truth. And when my words are hoarse and bloodied from the battlefield, my fierce words will lift me and set me back on my true course. But this voice can soothe, embrace you in words that keep your weeping at bay, support you, hold you, until the day your own fierce words form in your mouth, and you stand in this place and are free to have your say.
Yet again taking my breath away. Thank you. Lesley, I'm gonna finish us here because we've sort of run on long, and it's been so amazing to talk to you. It's such a privilege. I really, really appreciate you coming on this morning. Thank you very much.
That's okay. Thank you.